Millions of children are educated every day in a myriad of settings. Homeschool, public school, private school, charter schools, online academies, learning pods, private tutoring, and more. Why are so many families transitioning to homeschooling? What advantages have they found? What unique challenges do they face? What have they learned, and how can listening to their experiences support your child's education? These are their stories. Together, we learn. This is the Edvantage. Hello, fellow educators, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Todd Michael. Today, we welcome Yvonne Strachan of Inspirational Homeschooling. While homeschooling 5 children over the past 13 years, Yvonne Strachan has overcome many challenges. She teaches multiple children, a special needs child, and high school students while dealing with chronic illness and working part-time. Being uniquely equipped through her experiences, Yvonne guides and encourages homeschool parents by consulting with homeschool families, speaking at homeschool conventions, and working with homeschool groups nationwide. Yvonne is also the author of the book Inspirational Homeschooling. Her work has been published in Christian Home Educators of Colorado, Update Magazine, and the book Just Like You, a collection of homeschool journeys from Homeworks by Precept. She also writes blog posts for homeschoolhelp.com, the Christian Home Educators of Colorado blog, myhomeschoolhub.com, and inspirationalhomeschooling.com. Yvonne joined us from her home in Colorado Springs, where she resides with her 5 children and husband of 25 years. I hope you enjoy the interview. Yvonne Strachan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome to The Edvantage.
Thank you, Todd. I'm so happy to be here.
So I think one of the things that I've been most impressed by as I've been, kind of catching up on all of your social media postings and the things that you've put out there is how you are so focused on using your skills, your experience, your expertise, not to glorify yourself, but to uplift others, to truly be inspirational. And it makes me wonder, it gets me curious about how you got to the point where you can strengthen others, where you feel stable in your own journey, the experience you've had, to then reach out to others. Because I think for all of us, there's that point where we first decide to homeschool where it's terrifying, or we're unsure, or we're maybe not even sure if we're ready. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what that transition was like for you, where you started, what caused you to start homeschooling, and then, kind of how that led you to where you are today.
Wonderful. Yes, I was just like everyone else out there, feeling unequipped. When I met my husband, I met his sister who was homeschooling, and I grew up in Wisconsin on a farm. So I had never heard of homeschooling. I thought I was just intrigued, and this was in 96. Okay. And I thought, what is this homeschooling thing? And, why aren't those kids in school, and are they being socialized? Like all the questions everybody else asks.
Yes, ma'am.
All the things we write about. And so when we had our daughter, and our first daughter, she has Turner syndrome. So she has one X chromosome. And so she had heart surgeries. She's had eye surgeries, several different surgeries, and learning difficulties and things like that. We just poured a lot of care into her. So we had always talked about putting our children in Christian school. So when the time came to put her in school, we just did what we had talked about. We decided to put her in a Christian school. And at that time, I didn't feel equipped to homeschool. But however, I really wanted to homeschool because it just broke my heart dropping her off at school every day.
Yeah.
And, but I felt unequipped. So I didn't tell my husband about it at all.
Wow.
And yeah, so one day I was pregnant with my 3rd child, and he asked me if I wanted to homeschool. I just couldn't believe it. I thought, the Lord is working in his heart without me even having to say anything.
That's beautiful.
So, by that time, my sister-in-law was done homeschooling, and I thought, I can tap into her and she's going to help me out. She's done. She was going to school on her own. Her kids were out of the house. I mean, she sent stickers and said, have fun.
Wow. Not quite a full support experience.
Yeah. And I didn't know anybody else who homeschooled. We didn't have
Sure.
internet.
Yeah,
Um, and I know internet was around at that time, but we didn't have internet at our house.
sure.
And so I felt like I was pretty alone,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, okay, what am I going to use to teach my children? How am I going to do this? And so we did get internet, and I looked up on the papers for my daughter's Christian school, what curriculum she was using, because I really liked how she was learning about God. And I needed a
Sure.
guide. I was an interior designer. I was a kitchen designer. I was not a
Mm-hmm.
teacher. I needed a
Mm-hmm.
guide. I did not know how to do this thing. So I called, and I ordered my curriculum, and it helped me a lot. It helped guide me through uh,
Mm-hmm.
what we needed to do. And that first year, trying to figure out how to work through what we could together and see how that looked. And
Mm-hmm.
the first year went really well, aside from my infant son, who was very colicky. And
Mm-hmm.
so every day was kind of like, what are we going to do today? Well, this is the plans. And then you have the
Right.
colicky son, so you take off a half hour and give them a break, because
Sure.
you can't yell at your child trying to teach them over, someone who's
Over the
crying.
sound. Yeah. Yeah. Very relatable.
And so yeah, I think everyone with babies deals with that.
Mm-hmm.
And for people that are doing that, working with infants, I would just say, take it one step at a time, take care of that infant, and then in between, just work with your child, and you'll get through it one day at a time, because progress is progress.
Sure.
And as you're working with them, it's more than just homeschooling. And I think you can probably relate to that. I mean, homeschooling is more than just education, right?
Absolutely.
We are working with our children on their heart issues, on getting along with each other, on management, time management.
Sure.
All these things go into homeschooling, and um, it's all important.
It
Every
is.
every single aspect of that
I
is.
appreciate that you highlight that because I think, yeah, a lot of parents, similar to what you were describing, their hang up is the academics. They keep thinking, what if I don't know how to teach them? My wife, she talks about, I couldn't think or fathom how I could teach a child to read. Like that was so intimidating to her. And that was even being married to me, a credentialed educator working full time in a classroom, and then as an admin with a master's degree in education. Even then, having me to help her, she was intimidated by that. And so the academics, I think, kind of become this wall, but oftentimes we forget that, yes, and as parents, we're also especially well equipped for all of these other aspects, for helping them, you know, learn about who they are and about their own sense of self and their own self-confidence. And unfortunately, too often public schools are just not equipped. Not that the teachers are ill-equipped. Many teachers are great and have really great desires and would love to do more than they're able to do, but the system itself is just often not equipped. And to a certain extent, even in private schools and charter schools. And so absolutely, you're able to address the whole child. I'd love to hear, so you mentioned, you kind of being nervous to admit to your husband at first that that was something that you desired. Have you had conversations since as far as if he was open to homeschooling all along, or did something shift in him where he would have not been open to it if you had brought it up, but then by the time he brought it up with you, then he was ready? Has he said anything about that?
You know, I guess we never really talked about that.
Okay.
I, I I think it was just one of those things that we were on the same page, and
Mhm.
I was excited, and he was supportive. And I have to thank you for what you do in supporting your wife and being a part of that homeschool. That, I have to tell you, is so incredibly important. I don't know if I would still be homeschooling today if I didn't have the support of my husband.
Mhm.
That is, almost, I would say, maybe number one key aside from God and the guidance. And because there's days that just aren't easy. There's days when you wonder if you've selected the right things, because you see other people, taking all these kids on field trips and everything, and then you're home or you're doing something different.
Sure.
And for every family that looks different, because we each have different family dynamics. Some people have multiple children, and, just to get out of PJ, in the morning sometimes can be difficult.
Right.
And then, other people may have one or two, and, they want to go out, and that's something that speaks to them. And that's where they find joy in homeschooling. And so everybody's homeschool looks incredibly different. And sometimes that leads to a lot of questioning, because we see all these differences. And then we're like, well, maybe we should be doing that. Or, are we doing the right thing? Or is our kid learning, the way that they need to for what they need to do in the future? And each child is different. And I have 5, and they're all very, very different. My first one, like I've said before, has the Turner syndrome. So she's 21 this year. We're first graduating her this year. But I consider it a great leap of wonder and inspiration that she is where she's at, because the doctors told me she'd never get past 6th grade math. And she did algebra 2 this year. And she loves writing. She's written her own book, and she's edited my book, and she edits my posts, and she edits my my blog posts, and then my magazine articles and things like that. And she's very good at it. So she's going to go into editing and in that type of career. But God knew what he was doing all along. And the reason why I say that is because she, with the frontal lobe not fully developed, she can't think through a process quickly, but she can memorize well. So all those writing and grammar rules and things like that are in her head, and she loves reading. So she can work through that process as long as she has a guide, and she can work from home. But she won't be able to drive, because the processing of like having something come at you and figuring that out really quickly is very, very, very difficult for her. So yeah. And so he knew what he was doing all along in preparing her, but us getting her to that point has allowed her to be able to go on to further education, to go that route. Now, my second one, she wants to go to like one of the academies or ROTC. She wants to be a fighter pilot. So that looks way different, because it's rigorous and it's hard for any student. And she's 17, and being a mom of that can be that type of aspiration, can be very intimidating in itself. When you get to high school, all these things I need to do, and how does she get an appointment or even be considered, and those type of things, and where do I go for this? And I'm not, and it wasn't involved at all in aerospace, didn't know anything about it, but that I could pull from other people and ask questions, and hey, you know about this, and how can that person help? So she's been in programs where she's she soloed in a glider. She's done IFT flight, so powered flight, and she's working on getting her license for that. And then she's commander of her Civil Air Patrol unit. And then she does all her school studies, and then we have a tutor helping her for the SAT test. And there's just so much going into that. That's so different than my first child. So it's like, so I just always, with that, I always want to encourage people is, you know what? You don't have to know everything. You learn alongside them. You're their guidance counselor in a way, especially when you get to high school. And that can be hard. I mean, if you're looking at a regular school, they have somebody assigned as a guidance counselor. We're doing all
deep and narrow focus. Yeah, sure.
We're doing, my husband, one of the things that he says to me is, we are, as a mom, you have however many kids you have. Okay, each one of those is a job as you're teaching them. And then you're the
Amen.
guidance counselor, and then you're holding your home together and so on. And
It's
he'll tell me
incredible.
that when I'm overwhelmed, and I'm like, oh,
Sure.
yeah, I think I am doing that.
Right. I think it's been around probably for about as long as I've been alive, but it reminds me of that old, it started out, I think, as like a form letter, and now it's become like an internet share. But, it's like, oh, if you think staying home with your kids is akin to babysitting, or if teaching is akin to babysitting, okay, let's multiply out all the different responsibilities that I have, and I'll collect the, $5 million salary that adds up to for all the jobs that I'm taking care of. But it's true. I mean, homeschool moms, you know, moms have it so much that there is on their plate. And then when you add homeschool, it can multiply and multiply. The thing that I love, though, as you're talking, and that it reminds me of, is how much more your kids are able to follow their interests and not be limited by, the kind of status quo or the most common level of ability in their classes. Something that was really always challenging for me as a classroom teacher is how often you have to just keep moving forward to get to the next subject or to cover the next material, even when you have students, some of them who are struggling, even when you have some students who want to stay on that topic and dig deeper and learn more, and even when you have students who are, kind of somewhere in between. You're really just trying to keep this steady pace because there's so much pressure to get through all of it by the next assessment, or, before the end of the quarter, or before the end of the school year. And so, you mentioned your daughter is, slightly older than maybe she would have otherwise been. And yet here she is accomplishing things that, doctors never thought was possible. And so too often we limit ourselves to kind of these boxes. And I think you've illustrated beautifully with your own children, and the principles that you're highlighting illustrate so well that it really is a matter of tailoring it to them, to their needs, to their interests. I'm curious to hear a little more about, you mentioned that you designed kitchens. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I would love to hear, what that process is like, because I'm sure it's involved a fair amount of sacrifice. You kind of went from having, all that time during the day to devote to that. And I presume having a fair amount of success for as long as, I think I heard you say on one of your videos, you did it for 15 years before you started homeschooling. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, yeah. So I'd love to hear kind of what went into that transition, because I think that's another piece. A lot of women think, they hear us talk about, well, yes, the responsibilities are so big, and that can be intimidating. It can be overwhelming, and they can think, well, I kind of like my career. I want to stick with that, or I like the hobbies that I have. I don't want to lose out on those. So how do you find that balance?
Okay. So when I did the kitchen design, yeah, you can, I went to work every day, and then I was able to work on those designs, did real high-end homes, and it was rewarding. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And when my children were born, I just had this desire to be with them. And I didn't know that I would have such a pull in that direction, because so many people work and
Mm-hmm.
have children, they go to school and they do their thing, and then, you work and stuff. And giving that up was hard. It was hard because I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed it. And like you said, there was successes there. I had awards. I was doing these high-end homes, and it was fun.
Sure.
And so when I started homeschooling, I actually did that from home for about 3 years. So
Okay.
every once in a while, if my old boss would get something that he needed help designing, he would call on me, and I would do that. So I would just kind of work on that on the weekends and such. And you can do that. You
Sure.
can work part-time, and some people do full-time and
Mm-hmm.
homeschool. Um, Now what I do, I mean, writing a book is intense, and so
Imagine.
that was 3 years of, it took me a while, probably because I was also homeschooling and taking care of my
Sure.
family. But there was a lot of evenings that I gave up to write that book, because
Mm-hmm.
I needed to find time to do that. And whenever my husband would be called out, he was a policeman at the time. So whenever he would be called out, I would kind of, well, I can't sleep anyway. I'm going to worry about him. So I'll go down and write.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
It
I
needs to
mean,
be clean.
yeah, and that's like a full-time job. I was doing that in addition. And
Sure.
now I think I don't even know how I did it,
Yeah.
because I look at that and I go, well, that had to have been God to give me all the
Mhm.
stamina to do that, because I have no
Mhm.
idea how I had the time to do that, because I feel like I don't have time now.
Right.
So, but it's so rewarding and so worth
Mhm.
putting all that time into your children, because our children are our future. And
Mhm.
like you said, we can help them find out how God made them and glorify how God made them, and work towards their interests so early.
Mhm.
And we don't have to wait till they're in college. And we
Mhm.
can procure those interests, and they may change, and we can
Sure.
go a different direction with them. But always we can know that God hasn't wasted any part of that. Um, so I want to tell you, my daughter that's into the aerospace, into flying, that wants to be a fighter
Mhm.
pilot. When she
Mhm.
was younger, I used to make cakes. So I do all these, fancy cakes for birthdays. And then I did my daughter's, or my niece's, sorry, my niece's wedding cake. Well, my
Okay.
daughter really liked helping me. And so she's like, well, mom, I'd like to make cakes. I said, well, you can make some cakes. I have some friends that might like you to make some cakes for them. So she started doing that. And we created a Facebook page. And
Wow.
pretty soon she's getting friends of friends and orders, left and right, making these
So
cakes.
great. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is great. This is what she's going to do when she grows up. This is awesome. Well, she gets to be about high school age. So it's between 13 and 14.
Okay.
And we live in Colorado Springs. So
Mhm.
um, we visit the Air Force Academy. And I think she, her dad's a policeman. So she has like some aspect of her that just really wants more of a structure and drive in that direction. And she's
Sure.
like, I really like to fly airplanes, mom, but I've thought about this before, but I don't think we can do it, we can't afford it. And I'm like, whoa, wait, let's look into this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And her whole thing, whole interest took I call it a 180, because that's way
Sure.
different.
Right.
um and by this time I'm thinking, oh, I spent all this time trying to help her with this, and here I'm going to throw it away. And I thought,
Mhm.
wait, that's not true, because, we spent 30 hours sometimes trying to get a cake done for somebody. Um, and she would have to manage her money, because we would make her pay for the ingredients,
Sure.
and her time, and be responsible. And if she says she's going to do something, she better do it. And that's
Mhm.
transferred into everything that she does today.
I
She's
can
learned
imagine.
about business. And when you're commander of Civil Air Patrol, it's like running a business. It takes a lot of
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
And the time management, all those skills, nobody can take away from her. And so if God had that portion of plan in her education, that's
Mhm.
awesome. And then
Mhm.
my 10-year-old now, she loves doing cakes, so she's kind of taken over the business. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's so great. So I think it's really admirable that you have that awareness and that perspective. And I think it's easy for us to lose sight of that, to kind of think like, well, there are certain skills or certain abilities that are valuable to the world, and that's what I need to cultivate in my child. And I don't want to give them too much leeway to pursue something, because what if it doesn't make money? Or what if it just becomes a hobby and it doesn't, give anything back to them? And so you're recognizing that, that character development, that cultivation of those skills, those absolutely can apply. And whether or not, cake making or whatever it is what they choose to do for the rest of their lives, there's so many opportunities when they have the passion behind it. Because it wasn't you telling her, you need to learn how to bake cakes, I'm giving you this assignment. It was first led by her interest. I'm curious to hear, because there's a lot of parents, especially within the homeschool curious community, I'll call them, those who are interested but have their reservations. There's a lot of concern about college, and so thinking in terms of well, I wouldn't want to put my child at a disadvantage, or I wouldn't want to, what about the test that they need to take? Or what about, getting high enough grades and having evidence that they're smart enough to get into a good college, et cetera, et cetera. What's your perspective on, kind of that balance of college versus trades? Making sure that your child is equipped to pursue their interests, but also recognizing that there's a broad spectrum of things that they can do.
Right. Yeah. So, all of us have taken different paths in life. We all have special gifts, and that's by design. I mean, we don't want everybody to be a fireman or everybody
Right.
to be a homemaker, because we just, society doesn't work like that. And we're created to work together. So, we just need to glorify our children and how they're made and help them along the way. And that may look different for each one. So for us, we do academics, and some people will say that we do rigorous academics. So I do expect that from my kids, but I also want them, I mean, it's more than academics. It's more about the person and who they are going to be. So I want to give them a baseline and in their math skills and such, but where they can get to be, they don't have to get 100% A's, because like in math, for instance, it's not just about learning all about numbers. It's about figuring out how to solve problems and that step-by-step process. When you're in geometry and you're doing those proofs, those aren't always easy, but you have to, well, why am I doing this? Oh, wait, why am I doing this? And what gets me to there? And I think we have to realize what the underlying aspects of learning are and how those are applied to life. And so when we're learning those academics, what are we really trying to teach our children? And then taking that with whatever else is important to you. So if faith is important to you, put that into those academics, because we're raising human beings, we're raising children, and we're raising these guys to be a part of the world and be a light in the world. And so academics is a big part of that, but not the only aspect. So, like with my first child being an editor, I don't expect her to go to this great college. I just want her to get the certifications that she would need to move forward, and then open those doors and say yes. And I don't expect that all my children are going to go to a college. Now, my second child changed her path from cake making, where she probably wouldn't need much college, all the way to, if she wants to go to one of the academies, it's pretty rigorous what they require. And if I didn't have that baseline of academics, I couldn't say, hey, yeah, let's focus more that way, because I would have to have had to backtrack. So I kind of like to give them a base foundation to go where they need to go, but let them go where they need to go. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that's the key, is, keeping as many doors open, and then as they kind of choose which ones to go through, then you shore them up in those areas, trying to still keep other options open, not putting all their eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Right.
One of the things that I appreciate about homeschooling, and I think, from hearing you talk and from some of your other things that you've shared on social media that I think you appreciate, is this balance between like you say, the academics, but also, their connection with God. And, I happen to also be a believer. And so while this is certainly not a religious focused podcast, I think, considering that you're the guest and I know that's important to you, I just would like to talk a little about that. One of the things that, we find in school today so common is there's a lot of interest in, alongside objective facts and academics, teaching values and beliefs and kind of these social topics that not everybody agrees on. And so, just to kind of give a couple examples, I was an educator in California, born and raised there. I was very used to being kind of the odd one to be, religious at all, um, to kind of have more conservative values. There were so many things that were just not as common. Whereas then I have a friend who moved out of state. She grew up in California, and she's very, very liberal and very not religious. And she moved out of state, and right now she's struggling. She has 4 children, and her kids are, um, you know, getting pushback at school because they're in a district that is very conservative and is very religious. And so her
Mm.
family is, not feeling. And so I think one of the, big challenges where that stuff starts to get interjected into any school, whether, whichever direction you're going to take it, is that it's not always going to reflect every family because, like you say, every family is different. Um, and that's one of the big benefits of homeschool. And so I'm curious, as you've, homeschooled and as your kids have grown up, um, how have you seen them compare with maybe other friends that they have or other, kids in the family, extended family, things like that, who are in private schools or public schools? Do you find that there's much of a difference in their comfort with their faith, like your children living their faith, having it be integrated in their life? Do you see a contrast with them having it more integrated, or is that not as evident among their friends?
Okay. So my children seem to have their values and everything integrated into who they are into a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not just about one day a week or 2 hours once a week kind of thing, but
Sure.
more like, um, this is who I am. This is how I'm made.
Mm-hmm.
I made precious and special. And um, mom and dad see me for who I am. And I think God loves me for who I am. And I feel like their confidence in themselves and who they are is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in my older children, I can see that. And even in my child with
Sure.
Turner syndrome, when she
Mm-hmm.
was in that Christian school, she was getting people, you're slow. Um,
Mm.
you're taking so long on math and holding up the class. And there's a lot of negativity
Mm-hmm.
that she experienced. And I remember one child said, well, you like to wear dresses all the time. And she never wore a dress after that, ever.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
other kids can have such an influence, which I get that um, we want them to be able to work through those
Sure.
with others. But in homeschooling, the thing is, you can address that with them and
Mm-hmm.
pair with them and help guide them along the way and prepare them. So when they are out there at 18, they know how to deal with this because they've not just had to stumble through it, but
Right.
also they've had that person to walk alongside them because we see
Exactly.
what's going on every day and we can
Right.
see, the emotion drain out of their face if
Mm-hmm.
there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And we can address it. We don't have to wait until the weekend or that evening, or we know what's happening. We're more
Sure.
involved.
Sure.
And I think that's the thing about government versus homeschooling. Now, I think, homeschooling is not for everybody. Um,
Absolutely.
and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that we have schools to teach our children,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't ever want to put down our resources that we
Mm-hmm.
can go to. Um,
Right.
but where was I going with this? um, but with homeschooling, you can work with them. You love them more than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And um, you're so invested in who they are.
Right.
And um, and you can make those decisions for their well-being, their education, and all of these things. And I think that we can't remove parents. Government can never be better than parents.
Right.
They do not know those kids on a personal level,
Right.
and they can't help them the way that you can help them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need to, be thankful for our resources, but also that our government is thankful for our parents.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And yes, that's, it's funny because, so I was homeschooled. I then, went to college, got credentialed, went into the classroom as a teacher, later admin, thinking, I'm gonna, help improve the system. Never was it I'm against public school, everything about it is terrible. It was more like, let's take the good and add to it. Let's see what we can do to make things better. And I soon kind of started to realize that the system is so much bigger than any one person can shift. Um, Classroom teachers are beholden usually to district policies and union policies. Districts are usually beholden to state policies. State policies and union policies are set by most often lawmakers and special interests and lobbyists. Publishing companies are usually influenced heavily by those same influences. And so you kind of start to look up and you see like there's very few people who actually have any influence in large ways. And so there's kind of almost in society has become this divide or this almost adversarial relationship where if you support homeschool, people assume that you're against public school. And if you support public school, people assume that you're anti-homeschool. And really for me, it all comes down to the kids. Like, how can we make every single approach to education better for the sake of the kids? Not every family is able to homeschool. I mean, the majority of the children at the last school that I worked at, they were immigrants. Their both parents were working sun up to sundown in fields harvesting. There was not a realistic way that they were going to be able to choose to homeschool anytime soon. And so I would hate to say, like, let's turn our backs on public schools and abandon those families, while those of us who have the privilege and opportunity to, survive on one income can reap the benefits. So you say it beautifully well. I think we never want to just turn our backs on public school and say, well, too bad. But we also want to make sure there is that mutual appreciation. And I think there, for too long, has not been the appreciation of parents by public education, by governments. And that's kind of what's caused a lot of that friction. I would love to hear a little bit now about, you're very prolific, not just because you have 5 kids, but you're very prolific in your writings, in, speaking, in your influence. Tell us a little bit, especially anyone maybe who's not familiar, this is the first time they're hearing you speak or hearing of you. Tell us a little bit about some of the professional things that you've been able to do, the ways you've been able to directly influence other homeschool families, and how those listening can, benefit from that, where they can find you, what they can do to gain from that, because you're just your attitude is spot on. You have the accountability for the academics, but also the realistic approach. And I really appreciate that about you. You recognize that, yes, academics are really important. Yes, we teach the whole child. And also, yes, colicky babies can throw all of our best laid plans out the window.
That's so true. Yeah. So as time went on and I was homeschooling, I had the opportunity to have an art group at my home, and I loved just helping other homeschool families. And I didn't realize at that point how much encouragement people need, and how much friendship, and how much inspiration, and how much help, and guidance. And I came to a point where I was able to just help other people, and I really enjoyed that. And so I received a letter from the publisher I was using, and they asked if I would, just consult with homeschool families for them. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I could do that, I think, but I'm so busy. Maybe I can't. I don't know about this, And so I told my husband about it, and I said, I'm not going to do that, because I know I've got too much on my plate homeschooling 5 kids at this point. And he goes, no, I think you need to pray about that. I feel differently. So I did. And then I did go ahead and take that leap to do homeschool consulting. And that's with Homeworks by Precept. And so I do that, and I get calls all the time. I probably work one-on-one with over 100 people a year doing that. Wow. And then I work at conventions. I speak at conventions, and I've been in Nebraska and Kansas City. I go to Washington next week. Do the one in Denver and Colorado Springs, and then I have a little one in Pueblo locally, and then I'll be in Phoenix in July, and that one I won't be speaking at, but I'll just be working with the homeschool families consulting. And I have found it to be so rewarding. And so the first couple of years I was consulting more on a professional basis, I guess you can say. I realized that there was just so many more questions that people had than I realized. And so when I was putting together my first PowerPoint, I had all these things in there that I was going to say. And my husband goes, "That is too much. You should just write a book." So that's how the book came along. It was his idea.
That's so great. The book was first a PowerPoint.
Yeah. So I took my points on the PowerPoint and organized them into a book, and it's faith filled and faith based. So I incorporate a lot of scripture into it, and I actually base the organization of it off of 2 Peter 1:5-7, which is add to your faith goodness, and then self-control and perseverance and knowledge and so on. And so I organized the book that way. Yeah. So I talk about family and faith and, how to, and then I transition into how to make your days smoother. And then I transition into like the high school years, how do you do transcripts and all these things. And I have samples in there. And then at the end, sending those kids out into the world is very emotional. And so what does that look like? And I ended with that. So yeah. And so there's a lady from the Christian Home Educators of Colorado that read it, and she said she loved it, and she speaks a lot. So she always recommends it when she does her new to homeschooling track and such. And then I was able to give it to Deborah Wheeler at the Old Schoolhouse magazine, and she wrote a review for me too. And she just said she loved it. And I saw her at the convention in Nebraska, and she's like, "Your book is the best." I'm like, "Really?" Because
that's so great.
I don't, I'm not a marketer.
Right, right. Really, you're like, I just created it. I'm not really here to promote it.
Yeah, I don't know how to do all this. But it's just neat to get some of that feedback. And so it's called Inspirational Homeschooling. It's a Christian homeschooling guide to balancing academics and family life, and kind of like what we talked about, raising your children and helping your children, but also putting some academics in there and preparing them for the world. Yeah. So, and then with that, a lot of doors have opened, more with speaking as time goes on. But then also I was able to write blogs for like Christian Home Educators of Colorado, homeschoolhelp.com. I write for inspirationalhomeschooling.com. And I'd like to write more, as time goes on. And then the Check Update magazine, they published one of my articles in theirs too. So we're kind of working that way. I just enjoy encouraging and helping other people. I want to inspire other people. I want to let people know they can do this, and that their children will thrive. And, it's been such a blessing to me. So I just want to encourage others to try it, or at least try it maybe if they think that they can, and if it's an option for them. Because it may be something that they absolutely love. And it's really been a key part of raising our children, and it's been a blessing to us.
That's, the most common thing that I hear from homeschool families who've been in this for a while, is that it really is a blessing to the whole family. You get into it for the kids, and of course, as parents, we're prepared to make any sacrifice for our kids. But I think a lot of us underestimate when we are starting out how rewarding it becomes for us and how much we get out of it. It feels like some days you're putting in so much, but then when you kind of can take those brief moments to look back, you see how much of what you're putting into it you're getting, tenfold in return in terms of closeness and togetherness. My wife and I were just discussing this the other day of, since I resigned from my, away from home job and have been working from home. And since we've been homeschooling the kids, like the ways that our family has grown closer has, increased in respect and love for each other. We never thought that this level was possible when we were all kind of in different places doing different things. And her day was basically around taking my son to and from kindergarten. And, there's just all these extra layers and schedules and things that weren't really enriching anything, but were keeping us very busy. And so my advice, to anyone who's considering it is exactly think about that. Don't just think about, well, what's this going to take from me? But also remember, well, what am I going to gain? What can our family gain? And I think you've been a great example of that, of how people can gain that. Before we close, I would love to hear, if you imagine to yourself that homeschool parent, or homeschool curious parent who, maybe they just started and they're not sure if they want to stick with it, or maybe their kid is currently finishing up a year of public school or private school, and they're maybe considering transitioning to homeschool, but they're not 100% sure. Or maybe, they don't really see the value, but they're open to the idea. What advice do you have? What words would you have for that parent? As if you were sitting down one-on-one with them, what would you say to them to kind of help them think through what they need to consider to make that decision for themselves?
Okay. I love your point about relationships, because homeschooling is relationship building. It really is. Because it brings you all together and gives you more opportunity to be together every day. So I absolutely love that. So for people that are trying to figure out if they want to homeschool, what it would take to homeschool, I would like to just share a story, actually. So
Sure.
my daughter with the Turner syndrome, we brought her home. We started homeschooling her. And I thought, at this point, we're going to take it year by year to see if we want to, if I can do it, and how this works. So we're into it a few years, and her math is just incredibly hard, for her. And she's like in second grade doing 3 hours on math, and I'm like, I'm doing something wrong.
Wow.
I don't even know how to help her.
Yeah.
I started looking at specialists and talked to my husband about it. And we're like, well, maybe we need a specialist. We need to do something,
Sure.
I felt totally unequipped. So I'm distraught. I'm upset. I feel totally unequipped. I'm looking at options. And one day I put my 2 daughters to bed and I started crying. And I thought, well, what is this coming from? Why am I crying at this level? And I realized that when I brought her home, she became strong in who she was, because she's like, I'm a child of God. We're encouraging her about how she's helped us in life and all these things. And she had come from a point where people were, well, you're not fast enough, or you're not, from the
Sure.
school system. And I thought, wow, we had encouraged her to be more confident in who she is, and to love herself and be excited the way God made her. And if we put her back into a special system, she would likely have been separated. She wouldn't have been glorified for who she was, and she would have lost that. And I realized at that point that that's what that was. And I felt like I would have lost who she was as well if I would have sent her back to the school system or to a specialized area. And that point, I talked to my husband and my daughter, and I'm hugging her and crying. And I said, you know what? We're going to keep homeschooling her. And I never, ever question again, ever.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah. So I just encourage parents to kind of sit down and have a family discussion. What do you want to get out of homeschooling? What do you think it will develop as far as character, confidence, and such? And then what are your worries? Are you, and one of the big things is people do worry about socialization.
Sure.
But the thing is, there is and I think because there's homeschooling is becoming so much more prominent, we aren't asked why our kids aren't in school when we go out. Like like when I was a kid, if you weren't in
Right.
school, or probably even when you were being homeschooled,
Yes, ma'am. My mom got
people,
that question so often in the 90s. Yes.
right. Yes. But now, I mean, if you're out, nobody even asks anymore or thinks twice. I remember
Sure.
somebody telling me that they weren't in school. They were walking along the side of the road, and the policeman stopped and said, "Why aren't you in school?" "Oh, you're supposed to be in school. I'm going to take you there." Like that would
Wow.
never happen today.
Yeah.
There's so
That's
many
great.
homeschoolers and so many different school options, school choices.
Absolutely.
Besides homeschooling, even where people are out and the kids are out at different times. So with homeschooling, there's always so many different groups you can go to, and meetups and support groups, and you have social media. You have all these different ways that you can socialize your children. And for every con, it's almost like, okay, wait, there's an answer to this. But you do have to apply yourself. So are you willing to invest, and knowing that when you invest, you will get these things: the character, the confidence, the extra love, the relationships, And so if you sit down with your family and have that discussion and really write all those out and discuss it, that will help you to
Sure.
keep going. And then, when you're making choices on academics, on those extracurriculars, well, does this align with what our vision is, with what our goals are? It helps guide you. And then when you're worried about quitting, my husband can a lot of times don't remember, this is what we want to do with our children. This is our goals. So whatever they're doing, let's focus on this. And this is what we're getting out of it. You can come back to that family discussion. And, your kids, if they're part of that family discussion, then they're on the same page with you. And the other part about that is you can see what they would like to get. Well, I'm really interested in baking cakes. Can we do that when we're, homeschooling, or whatever it is? Right. And then it becomes a family goal, a family event, and you can hold each other up, and it can become a really, really great thing. So that's what I'm saying. And I wrote a blog post on that. That's actually going to be in that Update magazine as well, is the importance of a family homeschool discussion. I really encourage people to do that.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. I think that's such a powerful reminder to, take it back to the why, and to consider, yes, you have to invest, but your return on that investment is exponential. Homeschool is not for the faint of heart.
No.
It's not an easy way out, despite what society may have thought for many years. Oh, you're a stay-at-home mom and you homeschool. Oh, I wish I could just be home relaxing all day. My mom got a lot of that. It certainly is not meant to be that way. Now, are there, parents who abuse it? Oh, of course. Are there kids that are essentially truant and they call it homeschool because they just don't want to do anything? Of course, you're going to find those non-examples, just like you're going to find kids who go through, 12 grades of public school and feel like they haven't learned anything. However, by and large, the majority of homeschool families, they are investing a tremendous amount, and it does take effort. But as you well say, that return is unbelievable and beyond what you can get in most other options. So thank you for highlighting that. If people want to follow you on social media, will you share your handles and let them know too? I don't know if you mentioned before where they can find your book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did mention that. Inspirational Homeschooling can be found on Amazon or wherever books are sold, Walmart, etc., Barnes and Noble.
Beautiful.
Yes. And on social media, I'm on The Truth, the new social media, and on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and it's just Inspirational Homeschooling. So that's easy.
Okay,
and
great.
Then my website is inspirationalhomeschooling.com.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, Yvonne, thank you so much for coming on The Advantage. I feel like I've learned so much in this short amount of time and gained so much from you over the days that I've been, associated with you on social media and been absorbing some of your content. I haven't gotten to read your book yet, but I know I will so enjoy it when I do. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you not only for coming on the show, but thank you for your advocacy for homeschooling. You've taken what could have just been a positive experience for your family and you've expanded and magnified that to reach out to now countless other families. And you are continuing to do that, and you will continue to do that as the years come on. I know that you could have taken, a little bit more of a relaxed road and just focused on your own kids. But when I think about the benefits that have come and will continue to come from your advocacy and your education and your outreach to other parents, um, that is really remarkable. And thank you also for recognizing that homeschool is, it can be messy. It can be something that's not always exactly as you want it to go, and yet it still can be powerful. And I think that's the piece that more parents need reminders of, even the veteran homeschoolers who, are in the trenches. It's not going to be pretty every day, and that's a feature, not a bug. So thank you so much for all that you're doing and for being who you are. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. It's amazing what you're doing too.
It's not for me to get too lead, but I'ma take a step, follow my lead. And thank you, G, and thank you, Z, you know I got
That
you.
was Yvonne Strachan, author, blogger, speaker, and a truly inspirational homeschooler. If you like what you heard today, please take a moment to give our podcast a positive review to grow our audience, and be sure to share it with the other parents and educators in your life. For more information on how you can become a better educator, head over to homeschooladvantage.com and check out our free resources, or consider becoming a member to unlock your advantage. Until next time, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at homeschool_advantage, Facebook and YouTube, Homeschool Advantage, and on Twitter at homeschool_ed. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everybody.
If it wasn't for all of you, if it wasn't for all of you.